Okay, well, want to mention our special hybrid meeting information. Welcome back. If you have not been attending city council meetings, you can now attend in person, or you can continue to attend virtually by telephone or by computer through Zoom. For attending in person, there are three options to sign up to speak. One, you can complete a yellow request to speak slip and hand it to the clerk. Or two, scan the QR code to sign up.
Recording in progress.
And the code is located on a sign at the entrance to the chambers. Or three, enter your request to speak at the kiosk tablet at the back of the chamber. If participating remotely, use the raise your hand feature in Zoom and you'll be called on at the appropriate time. If calling in via phone, press *9 to raise your hand, and when called upon, press *6 to unmute. These options for public comment will remain open until I close the public comment period for that specific item. Here's an item on this meeting, and I'll read before we start the item to make sure we're all on the same channel for this particular item. The title of this is the Boards and Commissions Rules and Procedures, seeking an amendment to the rules and procedures as they exist. And I want to make mention that this item is related to the rules and procedures regarding the Planning Commission and not to any particular items or communications by individual planning commissioners that have happened at any recent meeting or other meetings. So with that said, we're going to go on to the first item. Boards and Commissions Rules and Procedures. I believe we have a presentation from members of the Housing Development, Community Development Department.
Thank you. Good evening, council members. Before you tonight is the item just described. It's about the Boards and Commissions Rules and Procedures and proposed amendments put together by the Community Development Department. So this item is before you following a study session from November of 2021. That study session was about the Planning Commission roles, and it was two parts. It had to do with the rules and procedures and all of the guidance documents that we have that guided that discussion, and there was also some policy questions that we had guidance for separately. So tonight we'll be talking about the response to the study session. So at the November 1st study session, the reference documents that we used from the conversation about the goals and procedures of the Planning Commission and their role had to do with the city's charter, the city's administration and personnel codes, and the municipal code, Title 27, which is the zoning code, and consider some additional information about the roles of the commission, as well as the Planning Commission handbook, which we've had for a long time and was quite lengthy, and we went in a little bit of a detail on that night. The council direction we received was to clarify the information in the handbook to be clear, accurate, and consistent internally and with all of our other documents. It was also brought up toward the end of the meeting that we could potentially consolidate that document with the boards and commissions rules and procedures. And we took a look to see where there were opportunities there to make that document more streamlined and efficient. And what we found is that most of the information was already contained in various other documents that had previously been in the handbook. So we did do that, and I'll talk about that more in a subsequent slide. We were also directed to incorporate joint annual study sessions between the Planning Commission and the City Council. For the proposed amendments to the rules and procedures, I went ahead and categorized them by the headings that are in the rules and procedures currently. So one of those is Commission Authority, which has a lot of general information and provides a good overview of the authority of the different boards and commissions in the city. What we did is we went back to the ones that maybe were missing some information that is specific to the Planning Commission, since the Planning Commission, unlike some of the other boards and commissions, makes decisions and also brings up policy recommendations for the council and makes recommendations on decisions that the council makes. We clarified some of the duties regarding staying on agenda topics and how to get topics on a future agenda. We also added some items for commissioner training and resource utilization. And so for trainings, the League of Cities puts on a Planning Commissioner Academy every year. The city budgets for that, and the planning commissioners have the option of attending or not attending. Generally, we at least have 2 or 3 who attend, but we added some language in the rules and procedures guidance to strongly encourage that during their first year as commissioners, they do attend, and that they make every effort to attend at least every other year. And I would point out that in addition to just general information that is contained in those academies, they also have special topics of interest each year. So for instance, last year was RENA, and then this year was SB 9. So they bring up timely things for that as well. And the other resource that we highlighted in the rules and procedures was the Institute for Local Governments Planning Commission Handbook, which is nearly 350 pages and encompasses everything we had in our handbook and more, and has a lot of just really useful information. It's kept current by ILG, and it can be referred to over and over again. And so we are also incorporating that in there. We added duties for the staff liaison, which is the city person who acts between the planning commission and the council. And we added the duty to arrange for the joint study sessions. So for the continued proposed amendments that go on to the other parts of the document, we have commissioner conduct. Again, we touched on future agenda items in that section. We also put a provision in there to reduce the use of electronic devices on the dais. We did that for several reasons, which are fairly obvious, but also just to make sure that everyone's paying attention and no one misses any part of the meeting. For the meetings themselves, we clarified that for planning commission discussions, they also include applicants. That's not true for the other boards and commissions, so that was something we needed to add in here to ensure that it also encompassed the planning commission. We added some clarifying language for managing the durations of public comments to ensure everyone gets the same amount of time. Some clarifications for folks who are speaking in person versus remotely, because it wasn't super clear that that distinction was being made. And also added a section clarifying that the chair has the authority to remove disruptive participants after warning and trying to regain order if it doesn't appear that order can be regained. There's also some planning commission comments at the end of your agenda, and those can be brought up if they relate to the rules and procedures. So our recommendation is to incorporate the final edits discussed in tonight's presentation in your agenda report and adopt a resolution approving those amendments, repealing the Planning Commission handbook, and if you have any other edits that you would like incorporated into the rules and procedures, then we can fold those in tonight if that's a result of the discussion. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Members of the council, do we have any questions for
I do, Mr. Mayor.
staff? Thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. The first question I have, when it comes to making representations of when you're communicating as like to say a planning commissioner, it was unclear to me if let's say a planning commissioner decides to let's say email a government agency like the HDC using their city email address with a signature that says Planning Commissioner, City of San Mateo, summarizing meetings and providing PowerPoints and stuff. Would that be allowed in these current guidelines?
I'm not sure that the guidelines speak to that specifically, but they do outline that when you are acting as a city representative versus a private resident of the city, that you make that distinction when providing public comments. And so that is contained in the handbook, and I would say that that carries out to making comments to other agencies or organizations on behalf of the city.
Yeah, I guess in this digital age, the equivalent of letterhead right now is official email addresses. And so like when you get an email that comes from like a city address, that a lot of times is construed as that's an official position or that's official communication, whereas if you get, so-and-so at gmail.com, that conveys more private person, no matter what you say in the email. So if that's not made clear in this, I guess when we get to the comments, I want to propose that it is made clear that at least, because, if a council member wants to do anything on company or on city letterhead, we have to get 3 votes to approve it. It doesn't make sense to me that an appointed planning commissioner would be able to do that, just kind of slipping that through. Okay, next question I have is, what happens when appointed commissioners do not follow the guidelines? Right now, let's just say in the future, a future council has an issue with a planning commissioner just sort of skirting the guidelines a little bit. Is there any avenue for an official censure or anything like that? Because that is something that I think that future councils might want to have to avoid other conflict or ambiguity.
So I'll start with the response to that question. No, we don't have an official censure procedure. I mean, I think practically speaking, what would happen if a member of any board or commission was perhaps inadvertently running afoul of the guidelines is I might talk to them and say, you should be aware of this portion of the guidelines. This is what it requires. And so in the future, here's what I would recommend you do in order to conform your conduct to the guidelines. That would be a very typical first step on my part.
Okay.
How would the public know that conversation occurred?
Well, it wouldn't be a public conversation. I would just talk to the individual. So the public wouldn't necessarily know that conversation actually happened, to your point.
Okay. No, I appreciate the clarification, because that, I guess, will be something else that I think it's important, because when our public, who is ultimately electing us, has repeated issues with a particular commissioner, which has happened many times in the past, I believe that their elected representatives who actually are beholden to the voters should have some sort of formal avenue to voice their displeasure. I mean, right now it's kind of like, well, in reports and announcements, you can make a comment or something, but it's just one of these things where the more official process there is, the less ambiguity there is, and the more smoothly things will go when things don't go as planned. The last question I have, and this will be to our city attorney, that before we started, the mayor said that the scope of this conversation is not to be on any specific, planning commissioner or any particular incident. But I want to make sure that the public feels free to, in their public comment period, to give us any feedback that or experiences that they've had that would help us form these guidelines and not muzzle the public. So I just wanted to make sure there wasn't any restriction on what the public has to say, as long as it has to do with commissioner guidelines and conduct and things like that.
Sure. So, I mean, what's on the agenda is boards and commissions rules and procedures amendment. So it says, adopt a resolution to amend the board and commission's rules and procedures to address specific guidance for the planning commission and to rescind the planning commissioner handbook. So in that sense, I mean, the public can comment on that item or whatever is related to that item. I think, the statement made at the outset of the meeting was a way to kind of focus the attention on the agenda item before the meeting. It's not in front of the council, that is. It's not that the public cannot reference comments made by planning commissioners and how that can inform public input on these procedures, and for that matter, so can the council. But it was a way to focus the attention, since we only have an hour, on what the agenda item that's in front of the council.
Great, thank you. Those are my questions.
I would just follow up on that before we go to public comment. I would concur. I think the conduct of planning commissioners is highly relevant to what we do in connection with adopting rules and procedures in any sort of handbook or guidelines or whatever it may be. So I want to hear from the public. I don't want any public comment to be restricted or limited in any way. I think the public really should be heard on what their experiences have been. I think it's up to the council to take those into consideration when they're determining what they want to do as far as outlining duties and obligations in commissioner handbooks. So I'm anxious to hear.
And we're not finished with questions from council members. Any others? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Mr. Mayor, and there's no one else raising their hands.
Okay, good. I want to make one thing very clear based on comments I just heard. I did not suggest that the public should not talk about, as they normally do, anything they want to talk about. However, I did suggest that we would like to see some degree of decorum, and I would suggest that people, well, I think I'll leave it right there. Then in that case, we're going to go straight to public comment.
Okay, if we will take public comment in the person first. If you have turned in please do turn in a speaker slip to me so you can address the council. If you want to make comments, speaker slips are available up front and they're in the back of the room. And also, if you are on the Zoom call, please raise your hand at this time so we can get an idea of the number of members of the public who would like to comment.
So, Madam Clerk, do you have any idea how many people we're looking at right now?
It's populating right now.
Okay.
We do have 3 in-person speakers. We'll start with them, and right now I have 2 hands raised on the Zoom call. Again, in the remote environment, if you could go ahead and raise your hand so we have an idea of the quantity of people, then that would be very helpful for us. Thank you.
Thank you
Okay.
very much, Mr. Clerk. In view of the number that we're seeing right now, I think we should go with 3 minutes each. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We will go 3 minutes each. The first speaker to come up will be Lori Heider, or Heater. Oh, hold on.
Okay, good evening, council members, and thank you for addressing what's in the handbook. I've heard some really good modifications tonight, so that's encouraging. But I'm here to request that the rules and procedures be revised to better define the boundaries for the commissioner's conduct during the Planning Commission meetings, because the commissioner's conduct on the July 12th meeting was pretty bad. It was inflammatory and insulting to a wide swath of community members. The current conduct has a chilling effect on public comment. The handbook says that the rules are intended to enhance public participation and debate. The primary role of the city commissions is to increase public input and participation. I think the commissioners need to be reminded of that because the public doesn't always feel like we're heard or that our comments are desired. The code of conduct requires commissioners to treat each other, council members, members of the public, with dignity, courtesy, and respect. They should keep comments clear, concise, and on topic. Allow everyone to be heard without fear of cheers or jeers that may discourage public comment and public participation. And to not accuse or overly challenge one another, members of the public or persons testifying. Those are good rules, and they seem clear, but as written, the rules are not preventing the insulting behavior by the commissioners towards the public. So they should be strengthened where you can. I think all of these rules were violated at the July 12th meeting regarding 415 Fairfax. There were a lot of complicated issues at that meeting, and Commissioners Patel and John Ebneter went beyond the role of commissioners. They weren't just applying the law and the regulations to the project. They repeatedly said that, oh, this project complies easily, without really delving into some of the details. Instead of explaining the reasoning for some of the conclusions, they questioned the motives of the commenters. They speculated. without basis what the motives of our diverse community were for objecting to the demolition of an historic home and proposed structure, and called us racist because we cared about the architecture and the design and the size of the house and how it fits into the neighborhood. People who opposed the project didn't know the race of the applicants, that they happened to be African American. The commissioners also sort of mixed up a lot of data, some inaccurate information from the applicant's architect instead of making their own. So I appreciate that you're revising this, and I request that you strengthen the methods of the boundaries for the conduct and to have accountability. What are the procedures and what will happen if the procedures go out of line? So,
Thank you. The next speaker is Diane Whitaker. And after that will be Lori Watanuki.
Good evening, Mayor, there, council members, and Madam Clerk. Diane Whitaker, North Central neighborhood resident. San Mateo commissioners are charged with making decisions and/or recommending decisions or actions to the city council. An important component of a commission meeting is the public comment portion, where commissioners receive input from the general public. San Mateo has a wealth of highly educated and respected professionals with many areas of expertise. Why is it that their input is so easily dismissed? What special qualifications do commissioners possess that make them the experts? Members of the public should be treated with courtesy and respect. As a 9-year San Mateo commissioner, I am aware of 2 commissioners who were asked to resign following disrespectful interactions with the public. So I ask you, what is the role of a San Mateo commissioner? Is it to push their individual agenda? Or is it to listen to the public and make a thoughtful and informed decision in the best interest of all San Mateans? Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Lori Watanuki.
Lori Watanuki. Good evening, Mayor Bonilla and members of the City Council. I did not write a letter, but I did speak at the meeting on July the 12th, and I did attend the meeting of 415 Fairfax. It is really important to have public participation, and it's not easy to get the courage to speak up during public comment. I agree with Lori Hyder's comments. It's important to treat each other and members of the public with dignity and courtesy and respect, and to take into consider an unbiased point of view, but to listen to another person's perspective. I agree that these rules need to be strengthened in the Commissioner's handbooks so that speakers do not feel intimidated or challenged when they give a public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Tassos Zagrafis.
Thank you. In a democracy, time for hearing public comments is as sacred as a person's right to vote. Public comment should never be discouraged or denied, especially not by an elected or appointed official. We have a duty to protect the sacredness of public commentary. More than 90% of folks shy away from public speaking for all kinds of reasons. So as leaders, you must do everything possible to allow, encourage open and free expression of views and opinions without any fear of reprisals, denigration, or intimidation. Such attacks are truly undemocratic. I understand this makes your job harder, but it's your job, your duty, and your obligation as leaders. Everyone's comment matters. I want to share something that I find appalling and disturbing and offensive. The City Planning Commissioner, Seema Patel, who, after listening to public comment about the impacts of a project before the commission, responded by implying residents were racist for voicing their concerns. No hard evidence cited. It was just how she felt in disagreement with what she had heard. As far as I'm aware, she has not yet acknowledged what she did, nor has she apologized to residents. Her actions were clearly meant to denigrate and intimidate the public and to squelch commentary. I believe her actions as a city commissioner are undemocratic. I ask the City Council to take this matter seriously and to take action to remedy immediately, both in reprimand to the commissioner and also to strengthen the language in the commissioner's handbook, not rescind it. If that wasn't bad enough, just this morning I saw a post on Nextdoor by a planning commissioner, Seema Patel again, making a false claim to smear a resident running for city council on views concerning pro-choice. I believe this was coordinated with the help of City Council member Lee, who curiously had sent an email to candidates running for city council demanding they each answer her by a deadline regarding their views on pro-choice. I found this to be a strange demand, and I personally would not have responded to it. But this candidate did respond to her with an answer. He answered the council member Lee's email in question. However, Seema Patel, a city planning commissioner, on his social media falsely attacked and falsely claimed he did not answer. This is an outright lie. And in the midst of all this, you now wish to rescind the Planning Commission handbook, which I suggest you strengthen. Now, the interesting on the timing of these actions and linked activities by the two city officials is interesting. What would motivate this participation? Well, there's a perceived quid pro quo. If City Council member Amelie is looking to be voted in as mayor next year, she'll need the help of some votes on the council. And so with the help of Seema Patel, they look to hurt the candidates against Adam Lorraine and Sarah Fields,
Tasso.
hoping to get them into council. I think this is bad politics.
Your time is up.
I would not rescind the Planning Commission's handbook. Thank you.
Are there any more members of in-person attendance who would like to speak? Okay, at this time, we're going to go to the remote Zoom attendees for speaking. The first speaker is Maggie Trin. Maggie, go ahead, please, unmute yourself.
Good evening, Mayor Bonilla and council members and city staff. I'm speaking, housing is an issue that creates a lot of strong feelings in San Mateo, and I just want to acknowledge that. And I also want to acknowledge, there's been a lot of demands for courtesy and respect and dignity and things like that. And I also, I want to, argue for the other side a little bit, what someone might call discourtesy, we might call disagreement or passion. And I think we need those things as well. There's going to be a lot of room for disagreement on these issues, but, learning what I have learned in more recent years about San Mateo's redlining in the past, historical exclusion of minorities, exclusions that appear in some of the deeds that we have. I think it is a fair, I think it's fair to expect that our planning commission be part of the solution for addressing these historical injustices. And when people criticize planning commissioners for even raising the topic, then we get to a place where, we're not allowed to even discuss the historical wrongs that we're trying to right. And then we get into situations where we can't discuss, there's some places where teachers are being told not to discuss slavery. They're being told not to discuss, other historical injustices such as, for example, a displacement of indigenous peoples in the United States. And so I just want to be very careful that a request for courtesy doesn't go so far as to actually impede progress. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Max Montner.
Hello, council members. Hello, staff. I'm Max. I'm a San Mateo resident, and I attended the July 12th Planning Commission meeting where the 415 Fairfax permit application was reviewed. I also gave public comment at the meeting, which is visible to the public as my comments are archived on YouTube indefinitely. And at the meeting, I was surprised to hear members of the public demanding that the Planning Commission members reject the application, asking that Planning Commissioner members advise the city to violate state law by blocking the permit. And after the public comment section of the meeting, Commissioners Ebnetter and Patel shared clear and unambiguous explanations for their decision-making. I, for one, am grateful to have commission members who fearlessly speak to the social justice issues that our community faces, especially as it relates to regulating land use and our strict prohibitions about it. I also know of similar cases in neighboring communities like the famous Flintstone House from 280, which Hillsborough got embroiled in a totally unnecessary sideshow of litigation, ending in a financial settlement, wasting taxpayer dollars and staff's time. I also contest the characterization of public comment as a democratic right. It's not as at state or national level, and there's no reason it's enshrined in municipal meetings. Public comment is a venue for soliciting input. It's often abused and suffers from extreme selection bias, especially at the local level, where the wealthy and retirees of the community have the disposable time to provide public comment on issues like individual houses that they do not own. All of the proposed changes to the commission guidelines tonight sound appropriate to me. I don't see a reason why it's not ratified. I just wanted to voice my objection to characterizations of how public speakers were treated at the July 12th meeting. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Michael Weinauer.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. This is Mike Weinhauer. I'm a resident of Central, and I just want to comment on this. For starters, just saying that, yes, we absolutely need to strengthen the guidelines, and per Councilmember Rodriguez, there needs to be accountability and recourse. And what I would argue is this needs to extend beyond just the commissioners to our council, because per Tassos Agrafos, Councilmember Lee's behavior is absolutely abhorrent and shameful, and she should publicly apologize to candidate Rodlin Harris for sending out a set of questions designed to ensnare him Labor Day weekend, and then putting an arbitrary deadline of Monday of Labor Day weekend. And when he answers it, but it doesn't fit her narrative, she posts to multiple social networks indicating that somehow inferring from his employer's potential position without disclosing his very clear and very pro-woman response that he's somehow anti-choice in an attempt to swing the vote. So again, the council can keep the majority, and Ms. Lee can get the mayorship. So, I mean, if this is what we're going to descend to, then we've got a real problem here. And I'd like to take just comment on Ms. Trin and the two speakers before. You know, I agree that you can't, there are instances of issues and whatnot. We have our problems and we have to address them. There is a fundamental difference between being able to address and discuss these issues and making blanket statements about an entire neighborhood, i.e. calling all these Baywood residents racist because they care about a historic home. So we have to be careful about that, right? No one's trying to squelch your free speech or let you talk about it, but you can't go on. Commissioner Patel went on a 15-minute rant. I mean, that's way over the line. And so go back and look at it. And if you don't come to that same conclusion, then, I'm not sure. I'm a pretty liberal guy, and I was really just taken aback by it. Anyway, so thank you very much. I hope you extend this, and Councilmember Lee, you owe him an apology. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Jonathan New.
Hi, good evening, Mayor Bonilla, council members and city staff. My name is Jonathan New, and I'm a resident of North Central San Mateo. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I just wanted to chime in defense of Commissioners Patel and Ebneter. Their remarks at the Planning Commission meeting regarding the 415 Fairfax project were eloquent, passionate, and above all, accurate. Voting against this project, which met HAA requirements, would have been illegal and exposed the city to needless litigation. If I recall, one of the last times that happened, it cost the city nearly $1 million in taxpayer money. We need commissioners who are willing and able to intelligently address difficult and uncomfortable problems. The Planning Commission Handbook even specifically details the commissioner's role in addressing historic and systemic inequities. In fact, I think they should be commended for addressing the elephant in the room, to borrow Commissioner Patel's phrase. I'm grateful and proud to have them be commissioners in San Mateo. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Nicole, followed by Sky, who will be our last speaker. Thank you. Nicole, please go ahead.
Hi there. My name is Nicole Fernandez, and I am a resident of North Central. I'm a former commissioner on the Community Relations Commission. I just wanted to take a moment today to first extend my sympathies to Commissioner Patel and Commissioner Ebneter, who have represented us just amazingly on the Planning Commission. I also want to speak to a former speaker just now who called out Councilmember Lee's right to practice free speech. Just because she's an elected official does not mean that she doesn't get to have free speech in her private life. So I applaud Commissioner Lee, Councilwoman Lee for that. I want to call attention to the Planning Commissioner's guidance. The Institute for Local Government is integrated into the Commissioner Handbook for Planning Commissioners, and I want to cite page 141 of tonight's packet, which integrates the Institute of Local Governance's best practices. Planning commissioners should understand how structural racism has been built into existing policies, amplify the voices of most people impacted by racial policies, and develop the Planning Commission's anti-racist and equity framework to guide decision-making on projects and policies. If that isn't what Commissioner Patel and Commissioner Ebneter did, then that, in my mind, that is exactly what they did. So the fact that we are having, quite frankly, a dog and pony show right now isn't doing our community any good. And I hope that we will take a step back from this. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Sky, and the last speaker we will have time to entertain is Jordan Grimes.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we are.
Okay. I just wanted to say that I think all the commissioners in San Mateo are doing a lot of hard work for very little personal benefit. And I think that as part of the hard work that they do, like, we should give them some benefit of the doubt. You know, we have to hold them to a higher standard, but these are like public servants who are like giving a lot to the community, and we should keep that in mind. And I think a lot of the problems that have come up over time are issues that really could have been objectively resolved. Like a previous commenter said, that rejecting the housing would just be against the law. Perhaps that should not have even in the first place ended up at a planning commissioner meeting. And I think reiterating the laws is appropriate. The amendments I also think are reasonable, but I just wanted to put that out there, that free speech is valuable even for public officials, and these are people who are working very hard and not getting much benefit, and I really appreciate the hard work that they do. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last speaker is Jordan Grimes.
Good evening, Council, Honorable Mayor. Jordan Grimes, 19th Avenue Park. I'm very glad to see this item moving forward. I think it's essential that the Planning Commission and Council start taking a more active and hands-on approach around not just development proposals, but also around public policy considerations. Additionally, I did want to applaud staff for proposing the adoption of the Institute of Local Government Handbook over the lengthy and outdated historical model the city has used prior to this. The ILG model is far more relevant, practical, and equitable than previous iterations and will serve all of us well. On that note, I was frankly appalled to read and hear tonight the public comments for this meeting. No way is a planning commissioner and woman of color, the only one on the commission, mind you, assessing and addressing potential racial and socioeconomic biases and animus in planning appeals and public comments inappropriate. It would in fact be inappropriate and inequitable not to address these things, given the historical trend of zoning, including in San Mateo, in our city, being used to keep both minorities and lower income groups from accessing high opportunity neighborhoods. Particularly timely, the Bay Area Equity Atlas just listed the Baywood neighborhood, where this project was, as number 20 on their list of the most segregated neighborhoods in the Bay Area of white and concentrations of white wealth. Commissioner Patel's conduct and commentary was entirely appropriate. It was fact-based, it was thoughtful, and strove to abide by state law, as all commissioners should. The response from affluent white residents of Baywood, however, has been deeply disturbing. The vitriol, invective, and personal crusade against a woman of color who dared question potential biases and animus of commenters is, I would argue, a perfect example of the exact racism and white fragility they themselves protest they do not possess. To those offended by Commissioner Patel's comments, I'd encourage this: look inward. To the council, please implement the new equity-focused handbook and protect commissioners from attacks like these. Thank you so much. Good evening.
Mr. Mayor, there are no other speakers.
Thank you very much. And let me then bring it back to the council. We're ready for final comments.
I'd like to go, if I could.
Sure.
So I have some prepared remarks because I think this is a really important subject. So I support the changes that we proposed. We may want to consider some sort of removal procedure. It seems a little ambiguous, so you might want to think about what that would entail or whether there's a censure procedure. And we can take a look at it. What I note about the handbook is that the duties of commissioners are relatively restricted. And in particular, as it relates to planning, it's to make land use decisions. And when it comes to a planning application, it's to apply the law to a project. And that's what happened in the case that's been discussed this evening. The law was applied to the project, and the project was approved. That's where it should have stopped. I see nothing in the guidelines that asks commissioners to use the dais to sit as judge and jury to speculate about what they think might be in a particular member of the public's heart. Nor should the commissioners be tasked with such speculation, as it's really not germane to the task at hand, which is to apply the law to an application. If there's a law that promotes racism, which we all agree is abhorrent, we can fight the good fight, and we'll change it, and that lies in the policy work, and that's the second part of what a commissioner does. No one condones laws that promote racism, especially as it relates to housing. We know the history of these laws, and they were not acceptable on any level ever. In adopting these guidelines, there will be no confusion about the limited scope of what a commissioner does in connection with a planning application. Apply the law to the project, and that's what happened here. They don't include sitting as judge and jury and having you speculate about what you think might be in someone's heart. Should a commissioner use the dais for such speculation, which isn't relevant to considering a planning application, then they should be removed. I submit that San Mateo can and must do better. This is not the San Mateo way. And it is my hope that through adopting these regulations, we can and will do better.
Thank you. Who's next?
I can go if. So, you know, I agree. I'll first say I agree with all of Deputy Mayor Pappin's comments, and I guess I want to get a little bit more in the nitty-gritty, because like with the situation where that many commenters brought up on both sides, you have a public hearing where I actually think the commissioners did a reasonable job of explaining their positions. But then, on a couple of the instances, you had the situation where one or two commissioners decide to kind of go on a different path. And the guidelines say, keep comments clear, concise, and on topic. Okay, so what I want to know is, does the guidelines permit someone to go on for 15 minutes talking about their childhood and unfortunate situations that happened during the childhood? It started, well, here's a little bit about me. I grew up in a small town, for 15 minutes. Discrimination, poking fun of them, arguing that those, Mr. Mayor, with all due respect, watch the video. So the commissioner goes on saying that somehow all those experiences that she experienced as a child and throughout her life, and it's unfortunate, I felt for those comments, but to somehow tie that into the facts of the case, of the hearing that they were talking to, and somehow that gives her special insights into, to use Deputy Mayor Pappin's words, the hearts and minds of the residents that were just communicating their opinion. I think that's wrong. I think San Mateo deserves better. One of the commenters said, you know, what about like teachers teaching students about slavery and racism? That's fine, let teachers teach students about slavery and racism, but a heads up to that public commenter, the Planning Commission are not teachers, and the public are not students. And I think that as a member of public, you need, as a member of the public, when you're on either side presenting your comments, you need to be treated with respect and not be accused of being a racist just because you disagree or just because they disagreed with the decision. So, you know, I don't think we're going to get anywhere tonight, because I think I'm in the minority in this view with this particular council. But what I want to say to the public, you know, I often hear, why doesn't council listen to me, or why doesn't planning commissioners listen to me? Well, there's going to be one time where the public is really going to listen to you, and that's a very important election coming up in November. And whatever side you're on, ask the candidates where they stand on how the behavior of a planning commissioner should be, because this is a big topic and it's very important. Ask the tough questions and vote where you think, how you think they should be conducting themselves. So the two changes that I would like to see is, I would like to, as Deputy Mayor Pappin also said, I'd like to see some accountability, some mechanism to go through this where if somebody is not following the guidelines, it's not like some going off-road on uncharted territory to bring everything back in track. I think that's really important. And the other thing was that, as I mentioned in my questions, I do believe that sending an email from your city address with your signature that says planning commissioner or whatever commissioner, I think that that should be excluded if you're not making communications on an official basis. So those are my comments on this.
Through the mayor, may I chime in briefly? So just in terms of how the guidelines essentially get enforced, so I spoke to that a little bit. I mean, either I or perhaps the community development director or the city manager, you know, may speak to an individual planning commissioner or any member of a board of commission and say, here's what the procedures require. And then there, you know, that it can be escalated to, for example, you know, there's a council liaison system in place. Individual council members, as I know you know, for the benefit of the public, you know, that council liaison can also speak to the individual board and commission member. Mm-hmm. We can also do other things and escalate further. For example, do training for that commissioner, mm-hmm. the entire commissioner, and have a study session with the entire commission at issue. And speaking to Deputy Mayor Pappin's earlier comment about a removal procedure, there is a removal procedure in the charter already for to remove board and commission members. They serve at the pleasure of the council. There's a process in place under the charter right now. It's a majority of the council plus one, so essentially 4 votes. But even before getting to that point, there's informally a multi-step procedure for bringing that board and commission member in line with the guidelines that apply to that commission.
And in your opinion, have we been following that procedure, or is that procedure moving forward?
We make every effort to apply those procedures and to talk to planning commissioners and members of other boards and commissions when we think there's an issue. That happens on a continuous basis. But as a part of this dialogue, I think we can kind of focus our efforts on making sure that our boards and commissions are fully aware of the guidelines.
So who makes the decision on whether or not staff decides to confront a commissioner?
Well, I'll look at the city clerk and the city manager, but I'll start by saying I think really there's an internal dialogue to see what happened, what did the guidelines say, and then making a decision as to who's the right person to reach out to that person. I mean, if it's a legal issue, then it would be me. If it's perhaps more of a pure policy issue, very likely would be the city manager. On occasion, it might be the city clerk. It just kind of depends.
Because in my experience, first off, we're not dealing with legal issues, it's more policy. And in my experience, a questionable judgment call is made. Residents are upset. We are the elected people that appointed these planning commissioners, and we are held accountable. And in the situation, let's say a hypothetical, that somebody who's the liaison doesn't think that thinks everything's fine, keep going as business as usual, but one or two council members take issue with it. And it's also a situation too, I think staff does a wonderful job, but it's also, I hear behind the scenes staff grumbling like, oh, I can't believe this happened, or I can't believe that happened. So there's obviously something going on, but yet nothing happens until it seems like the current process is 3 council members need to kind of get a groundswell of support to, basically ask somebody to leave, and if they don't leave, then you need a 4th. That sounds to me like what the current process is, and I just want to make sure that that the process that you're talking about is accessible, especially if future council members are in the minority, but they're also trying to address commissioner conduct. So that's all.
So I'll start by responding to that, and if any others want to chime in, please feel free. But I think the current process isn't that we wait for 4 members of the council to chime in. If we independently as staff think that there is some conduct by a member of a board or commission that runs afoul of the guidelines that applies to boards and commissions, we will talk to that person. It doesn't require, the guidelines were adopted by the council, so we assume that the council expects us as staff to actually implement those and to help members of boards and commissions to actually conform their conduct to those guidelines. So we don't necessarily look to the council and look for 4 sort of votes or nodding heads to go down that path. It's the guidelines are there, so they need to be implemented.
Okay, thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney, and thank you, Councilmember Rodriguez. Councilmember Goethals, any comments?
Briefly, I'll say that I think a number of people have mentioned free speech tonight being an important issue, especially when we're talking about public forums and public debate. And I agree that council members, commissioners, and members of the public need to have their free speech rights protected in all ways. The one limitation on speech that I heard tonight has to do with using city emails for communications to outside agencies. I think that city emails are an important tool for communicating with members of the public, and that in order to avoid the appearance that someone is speaking on behalf of the city, that city emails probably should not be used for communications with outside agencies. That's probably a good practice. But otherwise, I agree with the recommendations from staff with regards to the policy manual for the Planning Commission. This is a really important part of democracy, as was mentioned earlier. And listening to opinions from people who disagree with us is part of what we do. And even if you don't agree with their reasons and you don't agree with their conclusions, this is what's great about democracy. So I hope that that is not lost on us. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Goldfuss. So I'd like to say that.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes?
Councilmember Lee would like to make comments
Oh,
also.
sorry. Please go ahead, Councilmember.
Thank you. I would concur that I think our democracy is alive and well in San Mateo, and I appreciate the commenters and the public who have the courage to speak up, and also for our community members who sacrifice their time and energy to serve San Mateo in all capacities, and the staff who's put this together. I strongly support the staff recommendation, and I think it's efficient and thorough, and I am satisfied that our current procedures in place are working, and the checks in place are present. And if Majority Council is interested in amending a specific clause on use of city emails to outside agencies, I would be amenable to that. I think the same thing could be accomplished if we were to just ask those same folks to state in the email that they are emailing on behalf of themselves as an individual, as we ask commissioners to do so when they're making public comment. So I would be open to either of those suggestions.
Okay, thank you very much. So I want to open by just qualifying that I did watch this video, and I watch a lot of videos, Planning Commission videos especially, because from them come lots of important things that the public, which is indeed very well engaged in San Mateo, are paying very close attention to. And I want to make sure always that though we may disagree at times, we're being civil. We're agreeing to disagree. And I have to say, I'm going to cut to the chase. I'm underneath the runway at the Oxnard Airport, so forgive the occasional airplane. From time to time, a decision has been made or not made that has stirred some public ire. And I think that's because we have to recall that if you look at the reports, if you look at the voluminous information that planning commissions are asked to take and put into some order in their mind when forming a decision based on multiple sources of input, sometimes mistakes get made, and other times it's just a fact that whether the public likes it or not, those who commented like it or not, the law is on the side of approval for the project. And indeed, that's what happened here. I want to go back to a meeting that I watched. It was a planning commission meeting for San Ynez, where the planning commission decided to deny the project. It was brought to the city council whether we support the denial or not. And we heard a lot of public comments saying that the denial should be upheld. Many people, some of whom, one in particular spoke here tonight, was very loud and active in that neighborhood, making sure that the council, all except me, voted to uphold the denial. I didn't. But the upshot of all that is, while the decision was made in a way that the public in that neighborhood at least felt good with, many other people who support housing on El Camino, where apartment buildings are located, felt that that was not the right course of action. And in fact, the court agreed that that was not the right course of action. And in fact, the city lost a case that was brought against us for that decision. And it cost us a lot of money. And I think that any planning commission, when they're seeking to make decisions about projects like this one, which was questionable about whether it belonged at a public hearing or not, because it was very cut and dry. But there was so much public comment ahead of the actual meeting that it was decided, well, this meeting should be put in front of the public. And so there we are. And that's the democratic process. And I have no problem with that. I have no problem with public comment. But I think we need to all realize that we are all of different opinions. And I think that, inconsistent with what I heard earlier, we are all teachers and we are all students. We are all learning something every day. And somebody is teaching me something every day. And sometimes I'm teaching other people a couple of things. But that said, what I believe the Planning Commission was doing, and I did not hear them reference any particular person or group of people as racists. However, they did discuss the history of how the particular privilege that has been embedded in foundation, in the creation of that particular neighborhood came about. Some history doesn't hurt anybody. It's good to know. But they were explaining why the project had to be approved, despite the denials, okay? And despite the negative comments about the project itself, that the law was actually on the project's side. So sometimes that explanation can take a while. Individual people tell their stories or explain situations differently. And that's the way it is. We heard from our city attorney. And what I believe our city attorney was describing is people who don't work in city government may recognize this because it happens quite commonly in the workplace, and it's called progressive discipline, if discipline is needed. But then if you go back and look at the First Amendment, which I just heard people talking about, and democracy, we realize that a lively debate is not unusual. In fact, in this country right now, we're having a much more than lively debate. It's quite uncivil, actually. And I would like us to think about trying to be more civil when we're conducting these kinds of hearings and these kinds of conversations. I know we can do that. Although that's not what we always get. That's not, we don't always get what we want. That's just life. But I believe that the process that is described, where there is the council liaison, where there is the city attorney, where there is training, all these different options available that would be certainly available for anybody that worked here, right? Should be afforded to anybody else that has offered so generously their time to go through that pile of material twice a month to serve the public of the city of San Mateo is the least we can do. So yes, I have to say on the subject, I do support the recommended changes that are before us tonight. And yeah, and I think that's where I'll leave that. I want to thank you all for being here. It has not been an easy subject to cover. There was some anticipation, I think, on many people's parts leading up to this. This, like I said at the beginning, is not a hearing to determine the fate of any particular planning commissioners. How that meeting was conducted is how it was conducted, and the decision was made correctly. So here we go. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, the agenda requests whether to adopt a resolution to amend the boards and commission rules and procedures to address specific guidance for the Planning Commission and to rescind the Planning Commission handbook. So for this particular item, action is desired.
I would make a motion.
And, one moment. Okay, so Emma moved.
Second.
Okay. I couldn't hear. Okay, I second.
Deputy
Guys,
Mayor Sager.
Clarification on this motion, what does this include?
Why don't you bring up the question again so we can see what it is, so we know exactly.
So while Martin is bringing up the question, I will just say that the question was to whether or not to adopt the resolution and to direct us to make any edits to it and incorporate those therein.
And if I may, through the mayor, I heard a few council members reference adding language addressing planning commissioners not emailing other government agencies, perhaps other third parties, using city email and other means, but may do so as a private citizen. So there is some language I was writing up that I can just read, and the council can indicate whether it approves of that language being included in the procedures. So it would say.
Hold on, can you hold on one second?
Yes.
Mr. Stady? Thank you. You know, I think before we go there, we should have a discussion because it doesn't always require 3 council members to support a member of the council writing a letter to any particular outside agency. And I think that it depends on the context, what the letter is. I think if a commissioner, like a council member, wants to send a letter to any outside agency, they need to do the same thing and state that they're acting on their own and not as under the auspices of the city of San Mateo. But I believe the letter that was sent asked questions, and I really don't see a problem with asking questions. But that's aside, I think that as long as the commissioner or whoever states on their email that they are conducting their own business with questions, and which is the same thing I do all the time, there should not be an issue with that.
Mr. Mayor, clarification. So if the email is sent, asks a couple questions, and then includes a summary of Planning Commission proceedings plus a long PowerPoint, how would that fall under your logic?
So I believe that was clarifying information. I think it's good that we have people here who seek to articulate and make things very clear in order to try and get a good, clear information from an outside agency, which is labyrinthine and hard to get a response from. And if you don't give them all the information they need the first time you write to them, this could go on for 6 months trying to get a response. So I think it's good that anybody who writes to an organization like that makes it very clear exactly what they're asking about.
So just like council members are not, it's inappropriate for council members to use their email for political purposes or staff workers to use their company email for personal communication. I think for an appointed planning commissioner, I think it's safer to take out the judgment call of whether or not it's good or bad or whatever. It's much safer to just say, hey, look, if you want, as a private citizen, if you want to contact a government agency, use your Gmail account. It's not the letterhead of the, if you as mayor, have a letterhead that has the seal of San Mateo on it, and you just have a disclaimer sentence, oh, by the way, I'm emailing, or I'm writing you as a private citizen, and then you go on and it's still assigned, it still arrives an official letter, and it's still, the email's still received from the city of San Mateo, that can really be misconstrued. So I'm not in favor of that.
Well, thank you for those comments, but I want to say that what I think it does do is make sure that the letter actually gets looked at and maybe paid some attention to versus sliding down to the bottom of the email priority list. I think it's important that the Planning Commission and any commissioner who seeks information, they're going to be making important decisions about our housing element, about our general plan. All of these things they need to have full disclosure on from a state agency which has huge power over what we're doing here. I don't see a problem with that, okay? I think that if we can't trust our planning commissioners to conduct their business properly, then we have a real problem.
If I may summarize or
Thank
just
you.
state what I was going to add, which is again,
Sure.
the commissioner can send the communication. What I'm going to read is that they could not use city letterhead, email, seal, insignia, or the like. They can do so as a private citizen. So here is what I prepared. Planning commissioners may not communicate with other government agencies or other third parties using city letterhead, email, insignia, or other city symbols unless authorized by the Planning Commission, but may do so as a private citizen.
What would constitute a third party?
A third party, like a non-city party, perhaps it may be a nonprofit organization, another organization that's non-governmental in nature, but is an organization other than the city. Just the point is, the point of the language is to prevent a planning commissioner from communicating to another entity and be impliedly representing that they're representing the city to whoever else.
So let me ask that question. Did you say that if 3 members of the commission agree that this letter should be sent, then the commissioner could send it?
That would be,
That's different. That's a formal action that's already in the handbook.
that would be an authorized action
Okay.
for the
That's
planning
that's totally
commission.
provided for. We're talking about somebody
Yes.
doing something independently.
Right.
And may I suggest that that not only be restricted to the planning commission, it would be any commissioner. Fair?
Certainly.
Okay. I'm fine with that suggestion.
I'm getting uncomfortable about where we're at in the process of this additional language, because while I am thinking specifically about the example that I think is being referenced to about a specific commissioner and specific communication with HCD, and I thought that that was highly inappropriate. I can think of a lot of examples where using city email would be appropriate to third parties and even agencies if it's simply understood that I'm not communicating a position of the city or the commission or anyone else. I'm struggling. Good facts make bad law, and right now the circumstances of one particular situation, it sounds like it's driving a policy that would really restrict all commissioners from any communications with third parties. I really think the council position here is clear that speaking to an outside agency when it appears or when you're purporting to speak for the city or the commission would be wrong, but other types of communication would be all right. I hope that that's clear. I just don't know how to write it.
If I could, through the mayor, make a suggestion. Given the time, and I think, in listening to this conversation, I have some concerns about restricting things like this on the fly. If there's interest from the council to go ahead and approve what's been put forward tonight as staff's recommendation, and then if a majority of council wants us to take up this item separately and bring back some considerations at a future date, we could do that.
It seems like something that could be easily addressed in January at the Blue Sky meeting.
And I would be in favor of that.
So why don't we, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to agree.
We have a motion. I think we need to change the motion.
I think the motion applies. What was your motion, Emma?
So,
Deputy Mayor, would you like to finish your sentence?
yeah, whatever. I'd like to, I'm not sure because we had then talked about adding in some revisions. So let's just have the motion as it relates to what we got in front of us today, and we'll take up the other email situation at a later date. Fair to say? If you want to draw something and bring it back next time, we can get it done ASAP, which is fine by me. I don't need to wait until January. But we can get this done tonight because we did the bulk of the work.
Understood.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right, let's take a vote.
Okay, so my understanding is it's still just the original motion.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lee?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Pappen?
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yes.
Councilmember Goethals?
Yes.
Mayor Bonilla?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, well, thank you all and good night. This meeting's adjourned.
It's only 7:15.
You want to come back at 7:20 and start? You need a second?
Maybe 7:25. We need a little bit of setup time.
Okay, thank you.